All right. So welcome. We are so pleased to have all of you here this evening to hear Dr. Elizabeth Bagley from Project Drawdown. The Drawdown Project is the world's leading resource for climate solutions. Ruff Schofield from NC Policy Watch is also with us and will join Elizabeth in conversation. Thank you all for joining us tonight and for your interest and commitment to creation care. I am Gail Powell, Vice President of Education and Science Resources at ICCT and leader of the Education Action Team. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by ICCT and Orange Chatham Interfaith Care for Creation, our sister organization. I'd like to recognize the president of ICCT for her vision and endless efforts, Lynn Lyle. Lynn, would you please raise your hand and wave to everyone?
Where is she?
Can anyone see her?
Not anymore.
Not anymore? Oh, I guess because she's not.
There she is.
Okay.
Hey, there you are.
I'd now like to introduce Charles Coble, who's a member of Bagley Baptist Church in Chapel Hill and leader of the Orange Chatham Interfaith Care for Creation. Charles will start tonight's meeting with a Native American land acknowledgement, followed by an overview of Orange Chatham's upcoming events. Charles?
Okay. Well, Taos, if you're going to pull up a map that will help me make sense of what I'm getting ready to talk about. So what we want to do is acknowledge the fact that there were actually people and thousands of people and millions across this continent living in North America at the time of first contact. And this very interesting website, and we'll get a link to this for those who wish to learn more about it, shows all of the different tribes and different civilizations that lived in North America and actually all over the world at that time. And Taos, if I don't know if you're ready to zoom in on the Raleigh area. Okay, so what he's showing in this close-up is that in the general area of Wake County, one of the largest tribes, the southern band of the Tuscarora Indians, lived. They were later defeated in a major battle in 1712 in an area in present-day Greene County, and hundreds of warriors were killed, and many were sold into slavery, and others were fled to the Finger Lakes of New York. If you move to the left, this is the Orange, Chatham, Durham County areas, characterized by the Shakoti, Sissepohal, and later the Occaneechi tribes. They occupied these lands, and at first contact, disease and wars reduced all but the Occaneechi to extinction. So these tribes no longer exist except for the Occaneechi Indians. So let's come back out now. So I just wanted to remember that the lands we're living on were lands that were owned by, not really owned, but they occupied by these various tribes. So Orange County Care for Creation was formed in the summer of 2019, a few months after the formation of ICCT. ICC seeks to engage people of faith, congregations, and communities to become better stewards of the earth, to address climate change, and advocate for environmental justice for all life on earth. Our highest priorities are to develop our own organization, to engage more faith communities to be involved with us, to help us carry on our mission and our work. We promote more earth-friendly policies locally and beyond, and so we need help and we need people involved in doing that very thing. And we wish to collaborate more extensively with partners, the way we are tonight, of like-minded people and organizations that are committed to Earth Care. I want to mention our next major event. It's a Zoom program around the topic of community gardens. And it's going to be on Thursday, December the 3rd from 7 o'clock till 8:30 in the evening. ICCT and the North Carolina Cooperative Extension are partners in this production. Several community gardens and victory gardens will be highlighted during this program. You will see in a later graphic the Zoom link that will announce where this will, how to log into this event, and we'll post it in the chat room as well. So let me conclude by saying how grateful we are at OCICC to be invited to collaborate with ICCT tonight on this very special program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. And we certainly enjoy and value our collaboration with OCICC as well. Look forward to the drawdown or to the December webinar. Everyone remember to mark your calendars for December 3rd. So let's go back to interfaith creation care of the triangle for just a few minutes. ICCT works to care for creation, particularly issues addressing climate change and loss of biodiversity through faith communities. We're guided by faith, we're informed by science, and focused on environmental justice. Now in our second year, we have about 275 members associated with 65 faith communities. You can learn more about us and view creation care, faith-based and climate change resources on our website. Tonight, I want to briefly talk about an ICCT effort that started last winter with our education action team. And I see a number of you out there in the audience tonight. We made a decision to promote climate change education and action in our faith communities by delivering the hopeful, inspiring message of Project Drawdown. Since then, we've developed 4 webinars designed for faith communities. They offer concrete steps that individuals and faith communities can take to dramatically reduce their carbon footprints. You can view these slideshows on the resource page of our website. And thank you to all of those individuals in our action team and to our upcoming trainers, Russ, John, and Janet, for your many hours and of contributions. I would like to mention 2 additional areas of focus as well. ICCT is seeking members to serve as liaisons between our organization and their faith community. First, I'd like to thank and welcome our 18 new ICCT liaisons. If your faith community doesn't already have a liaison, you're invited to serve in that role for your community so it can more fully benefit from our resources and our programs. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a liaison with a minimal time commitment on your part, check the blog page on our website to learn more information. Recently, ICCT has engaged with an environmental racial justice issue here in Raleigh. The Downtown South Development Project, proposed by Kane Realty, poses threats to nearby historically Black neighborhoods. This 135-acre development could bring increased urban flooding caused by runoff, extreme traffic, gentrification, increased property taxes, and displacement of current residents. ICCT also has concerns about the developer's intentions to make sustainable building choices. Again, go to our website for more information. So I would now like to introduce our speaker for tonight's presentation, Reaching Drawdown, Climate Solutions for the Next Decade. Dr. Elizabeth Bagley, Director of Drawdown Learn, will enlighten us on the inspiring, hopeful message of Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown is to help the world reach drawdown. That's the point. In the future, when levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stop climbing and start to steadily decline, thereby stopping catastrophic climate change. Dr. Bagley will provide examples of climate solutions to inspire you and your faith communities to put climate solutions into action. So before joining Project Drawdown, Elizabeth directed sustainability efforts at the California Academy of Sciences and designed the science content for children's video games at Leapfrog. Dr. Bagley has worked as a naturalist and environmental educator. She's taught middle school and high school science and science pedagogy to teachers. Elizabeth holds 2 PhDs, one in environment and resources and another in educational psychology from the University of Wisconsin. She has earned Master of Science degrees in conservation biology and sustainable development, as well as educational psychology. She holds a bachelor's degree in zoology and conservation. Welcome, Dr. Bagley. ICCT is thrilled to host you as a speaker tonight. It's all yours, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight and really taking the time to think about creation care and what we can all do for this incredible planet that all of us call home. From a land acknowledgement perspective, I'm actually coming to you from Sitka, Alaska. So I'm in Southeast Alaska right now. I have a little bit of daylight left, and I am coming from the ancestral lands of the Tlingit. So it is such a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm going to get started with asking all of you a question. So I'd like you to open up your chat box, and I'd like you to answer this question. What comes to mind when you think of climate change and global warming? Go ahead and tell us what comes to mind in the chat box, please. And thanks, Claire. Claire is a fabulous rock star tonight and is willing to share some of them with us. Oh my gosh, Claire, go ahead, get started. What are
yeah, there's a lot of answers coming in.
Oh my gosh.
Threats, floods, melting ice caps, horror, sea levels rising, panic. Pretty representative sample. Existential threat.
Woo, Claire, my goodness, everybody. This is like pull the covers over our head. Like this is some serious, seriously depressing stuff. And that's what comes to mind. And that, to give us a little benchmark is actually what comes to mind for people around the world. So 14,000 people around the world were asked that exact same question. And 44% of those people talked about outcomes. They talked about a lot of the things that we just talked about, things like changing weather, melting ice caps, the things that we know climate change is causing. About 18% of people said that they think about the causes of climate change, things like the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. And only 3% of those 14,000 people from around the whole world said that they thought about solutions. So tonight, I really want us to embrace that opportunity to start and continue a conversation about climate solutions and the climate solutions that we can work together to put into place in our homes, in our houses of worship, in our communities and beyond. And my hope is that after tonight's conversation, solutions will actually be one of the first things that come to mind when you think about climate change and global warming. I know you're already doing incredibly important work, especially in your houses of worship, and I hope that you'll find other climate solutions that you can put into place all around the places that you spend time. So you might be wondering, well, what in the world are those solutions? Well, here is kind of an unreadable graphic. I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's actually the same thing that's right behind me. And we have posters of these that will be available on our website very soon for those of you who want a little visual motivation in your lives. So the question of what solutions exist when we think about climate is what started the nonprofit that I so gratefully work for, which is called Project Drawdown. And Project Drawdown is the world's leading resource for climate solutions. That's really what we think about. So in 2017, we published a New York Times best-selling book called Drawdown. And since then, the organization has really emerged as a leading resource of information and insight about climate solutions. And we know that cities, universities, houses of worship, corporations, policymakers, communities, and more turn to Project Drawdown as they really look to advance climate action in their communities. Our latest and greatest publication is available for free on our website, drawdown.org, and it's called the Drawdown Review. I'll mention this again at the end, but just today, you all are like in the perfect place at the perfect time. We just uploaded the Spanish and French translation. So if you have anyone in your communities who prefer to read French or Spanish, please share them with, share the Drawdown Review in their first language with them. So who does this work, right? Like who is out there looking for climate solutions? Thankfully, a lot of fabulous people. So we've worked over the years with a number of different research fellows who scour the landscape to really come up with an assessment of climate solutions that are feasible, that are in hand now, today, not something that's 10 years in the future, but things that are on the ground today that are actually either reducing sources of greenhouse gases, they're sucking them down, they're sinks, or they're improving society. So we have people who are doing research on the science. We also have people who are doing research on the best communication strategies. And when those two things meet, that's where the magic actually happens. But you might be wondering, well, you've kind of got a weird name. And we do indeed. What is Drawdown? Well, Drawdown, the name actually comes from a scientific term. The term drawdown indicates that future point in time. And so this red squiggly line, those are those heat trapping gases. Over time, if you imagine an x-axis, which is time, the y-axis as the concentration of those gases within the atmosphere, we know that the moment of drawdown is this fabulous point. It's the point where those heat trapping gases stop climbing and start to steadily decline. And this point, the moment of drawdown, is a critical turning point for life on Earth. And it's a point that we need to reach as quickly, as safely, and as equitably as possible. So how are we going to get there? Well, to achieve drawdown, we have to work on what we call all the aspects of the climate equation. So let's imagine that this gray box right here is all of the heat trapping gases that humans pump into the atmosphere every year. All right, so that's our holder of those heat trapping gases. But one thing that's really important to know is how do they get there? Ta-da! Here are the major sectors that are the sources of those heat trapping gases. So when we think about how those gases actually are getting into the atmosphere, we know that they're coming from electricity production. They're coming from food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, buildings, and other energy-related emissions. Added up, those are all of those excess heat trapping gases in our atmosphere. Thankfully, though, that's not where the equation stops. The equation continues with nature and what nature does best. So about 40% of those heat trapping gases that we're putting into the atmosphere are actually removed from the atmosphere in land sinks and coastal and ocean sinks. Way to go, nature. We are so grateful that you are doing what you're doing. However, about 60% of the heat trapping gases are left behind. And those gases that are left behind create this thick blanket around the planet. So knowing where those heat trapping gases are coming from, knowing the sources and where they're going helps us really identify the suite of climate solutions that we can implement to reach drawdown. So I'd like to introduce you to our drawdown framework for climate solutions. We want to really focus on the first S, which is reducing sources. You'll likely notice that these categories are the exact same categories that we just saw as the sources. So one of the things that we need to do to reach drawdown is we need to reduce the sources of those heat trapping gases. We also need to support and enhance the sinks of carbon dioxide found in nature. Let's help nature do what it does best, right? So we want the second S, which is sinks. We want to reduce sources we want to support sinks, and we want to do the third S, which is helps improve society. We want to help society achieve broader transformation. So this, everybody, this is the Drawdown Framework for Climate Solutions, and these are the 3 interconnected areas for action, which we need to pursue globally, simultaneously, and with determination. So we've got sources, we've got sinks, and we have society. So today, I'm going to provide you with an overview of the climate solutions that we have in hand now today to reach drawdown, and to really begin to come back into balance with the planet's living systems. These solutions that we have are tools of possibility in the face of a seemingly impossible challenge. Most of you here are already part of the chorus of people working on climate solutions. But there might be people in your houses of worship, in your congregations, in your communities who aren't yet part of the chorus. And one way that we can really connect with them is through our shared values and leaning into creation care and wanting to steward the incredible planet that we get to call home. So we know that people and institutions of all kinds in all places have roles to play in a great transformation that's unfolding. And the solutions that we're going to talk about tonight are really a synthesis or a collection of collective wisdom and collective action unfolding around the globe. Now, one of the amazing things about climate solutions is that beyond just addressing heat trapping gases, climate solutions often have what we call co-benefits that contribute to a better, more equitable world. I so appreciated Gail talking about the importance of racial equity in the work that you do. So climate solutions are rarely just climate solutions. For example, climate solutions that curb air pollution are also health solutions. Others that protect and restore ecosystems are also biodiversity solutions. Many climate solutions create jobs, foster resilience to climate impacts like storms and droughts, and they bring other environmental benefits like safeguarding water resources. So the poorest and the most vulnerable among us, unfortunately, are those who are most impacted by the impacts of climate. And so as we think about solutions, I really implore us to have intention, care, and courage to move solutions forward in ways that heal rather than deepen systemic injustices, because we have the opportunity and we have the obligation to co-create systems that are safe and equitable, ensuring that both people and the planet can thrive together. So what can you do? Well, we know that widespread awareness and understanding of climate solutions is really vital to kindle agency and affect change worldwide. So first of all, thanks for being here tonight. And thanks for being part of the education and engagement work that you all are doing in North Carolina. That is incredible, and I'm so grateful that you are talking about climate solutions. So we know that the world, our society, and future generations need all of us to be part of the solutions. But how do you do that? Well, you know, that's up to you. This is an image of youth marching for climate. That might not be your style, and that's okay. If it's not your style, I invite you to find what is. Maybe your style is talking about climate. I notice on the ICCT website, you have some fabulous links to Catherine Hayhoe's videos. And what Catherine talks about is one of the most important things we can all do about climate is talk about it. So one of the things all of us can do with our voices and with our pens or with our tablets, with our keyboards, is we can talk about climate so that we can bring it top of mind for people and move it into a space of action. So you are taking such a great step by learning with me tonight, and I encourage you to share what you're learning with your community. So with that, I want to come back to this framework for climate solutions, and I want to start by diving into each of these sectors. And we're going to specifically start with the electricity sector. So since the emergence of electrical systems way back in the late 1800s, you know, society has created most of its electricity by using fossil fuels, by burning coal, oil, or natural gas. And that locked up energy of long buried plants and animals, it's turned into electricity. And as a result, carbon dioxide spills into the atmosphere as a byproduct. So when we think about solutions that we can lean into related to electricity, we have a lot of what I'd love for you to notice about this, and we call this is a very scientific name. We call them the bubble diagrams. And the bubble diagrams, to give you an orientation, we have one of these for each of our solution sectors. So in electricity, what you'll notice is that, first of all, there are two big circles. So one of the areas of solutions is shifting production. We know that shifting production away from non-renewable resources like fossil fuels is an incredible solution set. We also know that enhancing efficiency is another great set of solutions. And of course, in the lower right, we know that the system needs to be improved as well. So we want to shift production, we want to enhance efficiency, and we want to improve the system. So within each of those bubbles, what you're seeing are bubbles that are relative size. They have the sizes are compared relative to all of them throughout all of the sectors that we'll see today. So the bigger the bubble, the more potential there is for, in this case, reducing those heat trapping gases. Now, bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. When we, what we really want to stress at Project Drawdown is that all of these solutions are needed as this mosaic of solutions that we want to implement as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. So if you see something that you are really passionate about that isn't big, it doesn't mean it's not important. It just means, that that also is a fabulous solution. So what we're seeing here, shifting production, enhancing efficiency, improving the system. I would love to geek out with all of you and talk about the differences and some of the amazing stories of solutions in action behind each of these solutions. I'm going to invite you instead to visit our website to dive into each of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out one story about one solution and kind of give you a little taste of how people, and specifically people in faith communities, are leaning into some of these solutions around the world. So first of all, I want to take us to California, and I want to specifically take us to the Central Valley of California, where there's an organization called Faith in the Valley. And Faith in the Valley is made up of about 120 congregations representing over 100,000 people. And they come together with community partners to create a different and a better future in the Valley for its families and communities. So their core values are really focused on creating a better future and being those active architects of that future. So their mission is to unlock the power of people to put faith into action in the public square and to advance a movement for racial justice and health equity. They seek to build relational power to lift up a new narrative about the lives of people of color and drive civic engagement efforts that move their community forward. And they know that without racial justice, there is no climate justice. So what are they doing? Well, one of the projects they're working on is a clean energy jobs campaign. So Faith in the Valley is working with key partners to create tens of thousands of new well-paid clean energy jobs and job training pipelines for people who have been excluded from employment or struggled with poverty, and to speed up the transition to clean energy and create healthier environments all across the Central Valley. They're also partnering with prominent faith institutions to power their congregations and their facilities with renewable energy. And in the process, they're challenging cities and public entities to do the same. So my question to you is, how might you come together as faith communities to really embrace electricity-related climate solutions and support the co-benefits of racial equity? So we know that electricity is one of the sectors that we can focus on, and another sector with lots of climate solutions is our food, agriculture, and land use sector. When we look at that sector, we see incredible opportunities when we focus on food waste and plant-rich diets. We also see opportunities for shifting agricultural practices and protecting ecosystems. But today, I want to talk about food waste. A third of the food on the planet is never eaten. And that means that the land, the resources used, the heat trapping gases emitted in producing that food were all completely unnecessary. But we know that food waste is an absolutely solvable problem. And it's a problem that can be solved lots of different ways. I know Charles and his congregation have solved it in their way. And today I want to talk about community composting. Inspired by a community composting project at the All Saints Episcopal Church in New Albany, Ohio, you can now access a step-by-step guide for starting your own community composting program at this site, which is called ChangeX. So it's changex.org. All Saints contracted with a local composting company to pick up compost from the church and invited members to bring their compostables to the church for pickup. Stephanie, who's one of the Creation Care team members, said, "My family started composting in February, and it's been great. I like to think about our food scraps helping to provide more food to our society in the future, like a mini circle of life." So what ideas do you have for reducing food waste in your community? I know most of us are not gathering in person, but how might you start to put the wheels in motion so that when we can safely gather again, you are set up for success and have programs like this that support both your community and the land in your community, as well as reducing emissions from food waste. Again, ChangeX has this step-by-step amazing guidance for you to get started and just jump right in. We're going to pivot into industry. And industry, when we think about industry, from concrete to computers, cars to clothing, industry is a sector of production that makes them all. And when we think about solutions in the industry sector, some of them might seem like they're really hard for us to grasp. The big one in the middle is addressing refrigerants. And refrigerants are those chemicals that we find in our air conditioners and our refrigerators. And those molecules are really good at trapping heat because that's what they need to do. They need to trap heat so our houses stay cool and our food stays cool. The problem is that when they leak, so when we dispose of our air conditioners or refrigerators, when they leak, those heat trapping gases keep doing their job in the atmosphere. And unfortunately, they do their job really well and they trap a lot of heat. So a huge area for solutions is around refrigerant management. One small thing y'all can do there is when, if you're replacing any air conditioning or any refrigeration in your houses of worship, make sure that you're doing it responsibly. So there are loads of places who can take it away and actually neutralize the gases so they're not released into the atmosphere. But what I want to talk about today is actually something a little different, and it might not really seem like a climate solution, but it absolutely is. One part of industry is really thinking about a more circular economy so that we don't need as many raw materials. And if we don't need as many raw materials if we fix stuff. So one way that we can move towards that more circular economy is by setting up something like this. And again, this doesn't look like how we can meet during COVID times, but hopefully in the after times we can. And you could set up a repair cafe in your town or your city. And you could help create a more sustainable society where everybody can find a place where repair expertise is cherished and it's passed on, and where valuable raw materials are used in a responsible way. It's really fun. You meet people from the neighborhood. You get to meet people from your faith community you might not have connected with before. And you also get to help the environment. There was another step-by-step guide for this on ChangeX. I appreciate the work that they've done so much on really bringing us along on a journey so that we don't have to do all of the heavy lifting. So my charge to you is to think about the opportunities for fellowship and climate action that might come with something like a repair cafe in your community. We know that transportation is incredible. We know that mobility has played a really critical and complex role in shaping society, and the demand for it is only growing. But most of the energy driving mobility has been generated by burning gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Here are our transportation solutions. We want to make sure we're shifting to alternatives, enhancing efficiency, and electrifying vehicles. So how do we do that? And how do we do that in our houses of worship? Well, what about following the lead of congregations around the country that have dedicated parking spaces and sometimes even chargers for electric vehicle drivers? And other congregations, like the Second Congregational Church in Bennington, Vermont, they've taken sustainable transportation a step further by hosting on-site electric vehicle and electric bike demonstrations, providing community members with a chance to try out a new climate-friendly technology from a trusted congregant. One of the most impactful climate actions all of us can work towards is talking about climate solutions, like we already talked about. And one step even better than that is providing hands-on demonstrations of climate solutions. That's an incredible extension of that action. When we can safely gather again, what about having hands-on demonstrations of climate solutions like electric bikes and cars, and how might that play a role in your next gathering? Really lowering the barriers to people trying something new. If that doesn't seem like a good fit, might you consider hosting a bike sharing location on your property so that the community can access a climate-friendly shared resource? Do you have bike racks for people to store their bikes during a service? Seemingly small acts like that can really help support climate solutions and promote healthy lifestyle choices too. There's that co-benefit coming back up. Thinking about buildings, buildings are major drivers of emissions, and many of you in your houses of worship have already done incredible things, from solar panels to gray water systems and everything in between, to really reduce the impact of your physical buildings, the environmental impact of those physical buildings. When we think about buildings, we think about three main solution areas. We think about enhancing efficiency. You'll notice that's a pretty common refrain about what I talk about. We always want to be as efficient as possible in everything we do. We also talk about shifting energy sources and, of course, addressing those refrigerants. So today I want to extend, there's lots of faith communities that have solar panels that have shifted their energy sources. And I want us to extend into our communities and take us specifically to Buffalo, New York. And in Buffalo, New York, it's a city that's filled with old houses. And those old houses really challenge their residents with high heating costs that are generated by long and demanding winters. And it's not unusual for a heating bill to come in at or the same or higher than the cost of rent, actually. And hundreds of area residents are working with an organization called Push Buffalo, People United for Sustainable Housing, in efforts to weatherproof homes, install solar energy systems, and work together to gain climate resilience. By enhancing energy efficiency or building efficiency, by uplifting residents and building partnerships, communities can really become powerful leaders in advancing health equity and climate resilience. So I wonder, how might your faith communities support families in their home efficiency projects? Could you explore a bulk solar panel purchase? How about curating some how-to videos about weatherproofing and sharing them in your weekly bulletin or newsletter? So we've talked about reducing sources. Let's now shift to supporting and enhancing those sinks, because we know that land is a critical component of the climate system. It's actively engaged in the flows of carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen, which are all essential building blocks for life. And wow, we have a lot of solutions related to land sinks. So when we think about being stewards of the land, we can think about shifting agricultural practices, protecting and restoring ecosystems, using degraded land. And this is where also addressing food waste and diets come back into the equation. And for this story, I want us to go to the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood, New York. They really feel a sense of responsibility to the land that's in their care. And they pulled from their religious and their ethical beliefs to create a plan for the future of the land that they owned. Many faith communities own large amounts of land, and the Sisters of St. Joseph decided that this land that they owned was not being used it was not being stewarded in the most amazing way possible. So they worked with a local land trust to preserve parcels of their Brentwood campus and return it to agricultural production. So 28 acres of land are leased to several farmers, which enable the fields that were once a working farm to be restored to farming. The farmers they use organic practices, and the produce is available at a farm stand for purchase by the local community. The Sisters of St. Joseph know that the health of the soil is connected to the health of the community. And the healthy soil sequesters or stores more carbon, which acts as a really important land-based sink, a critical climate solution. So how might your faith community enhance the carbon sinks on the properties that you steward? And when we think about sinks, our coastal and ocean areas are incredible spaces for also absorbing carbon. And unfortunately, that's happening. A lot more of that is happening and leading to things like ocean acidification, which we know are not good things for our ocean. So we know that oceans will continue to be on the front lines of climate change, as will the people who live near them. And solutions focused on the coastal and marine sinks can provide additional benefits, from storm protection to healthy fisheries. And it's impossible to separate blue from green, land from sea. They and we are fundamentally intertwined. Now, in North Carolina, you live in a coastal state. And one incredible asset that you have is the suite of North Carolina aquariums on your coast. Before I joined Project Drawdown, I worked at the California Academy of Sciences, which is a natural history museum, aquarium, and planetarium all under a living roof. And during my time there, I learned about the fantastic conservation work happening through aquariums around the country. So when we can safely gather again, what about considering volunteering with one of the aquariums on their Living Shorelines project, where they're strategically placing plants, stone, sand fill, and other structural and organic materials to improve the resilience of the coastline? We don't have to, nor should we try to implement these solutions on our own. So I encourage you to find other people and organizations who are interested in the same goals to work together to have a larger impact. Those aquariums have incredible partnerships with NOAA and other coastal organizations, and you're not that far away. If you need a trip to the coast, maybe you bring a group from your faith community and volunteer with them to really improve the coastal and ocean sinks. So we know that we need to reduce the sources. We also need to reduce the sink, or excuse me, we need to reduce sources, support the sinks. We don't want to reduce them, and we want to improve society. And improving society includes solutions that we should implement anyway, even if climate change wasn't an issue. By developing a more equitable society, we can actually help with climate change. Now, climate and social systems are profoundly connected, and those connections open up solutions that are often overlooked. Some initiatives designed primarily to ensure rights and foster equality also have cascading benefits to climate change. They include things like access to high quality voluntary reproductive health care and to high quality inclusive education, which are fundamental human rights and cornerstones of gender equality. In more indirect ways, making strides in health and education can also benefit the climate. It's critical that human rights are always centered, that gender equity is the aim, and that benefits to the planet are understood as positive ripple effects of access and agency. So one way that your faith community might be able to start or strengthen a conversation about climate solutions is through something called the Drawdown Eco Challenge. The Drawdown Eco Challenge is a fun and social way to take measurable action on climate. The Drawdown Eco Challenge runs year-round. You create teams, you track your progress, all while putting climate solutions into place. And they actually have action tracks. So they have an action track specifically focused on social justice. So if you're interested in what are the actions that really lean into that co-benefit of social justice, this is a great way for you just to peek into and kind of see where those intersections really exist. So if we do all these things, right, if we reduce sources by implementing solutions focused on electricity, on food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, and buildings, if we support sinks on land and in the ocean, and if we improve society through healthcare and education, we can actually reach drawdown. I've shared a few climate solutions with you today, and you have many, many of your own climate solutions underway in your faith communities and your larger communities. So what's next? Well, let me tell you first that there's a lot going on at Project Drawdown these days. As I mentioned earlier, the Spanish and French translations of the Drawdown Review were posted on our website today. So please share the content with your Spanish and French speaking friends and neighbors. And the English version is up there as well. And these are all free downloads. We also recently released a paper aligning the Drawdown climate solutions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We get asked often, well, you know, how do these all align? And here it is. It looks kind of unreadable here, a lot of pretty colors. And if you're interested in the paper, that's freely available as well. And I'm extremely excited about this. You might be wondering, who are these 10 people on the screen? Well, these 10 people are all experts in climate from a number of different areas. So Leah Stokes in the upper left, I think that's probably how you're seeing it as well. She's a professor at UC Santa Barbara who really focuses on policy, especially on energy policy. And this array of experts were interviewed by Dr. Jonathan Foley. He's our executive director at Project Drawdown. And in early 2021, so right in January, we'll be coming out with a series of videos about the science behind climate solutions. So Dr. Foley will walk us through the science behind climate solutions, and these experts will share their expertise and their insights about where climate solutions are in the world. I am so excited to share those with you. Those will be freely available on our website. I encourage you so much to use them as jumping off points for your discussions about climate solutions that can really lead to action. And soon we'll have copies of these posters, what you're seeing as my background right now, for you to download and print. Those will be on our website quite soon. They're two-sided. They have the solutions on one side and the accelerators on the other side. So the words that you might have been reading in my background are really the ways that we can accelerate the changes that we need to see. We need to shape culture, build power, set goals, alter rules and policy, shift capital, change behavior, and improve technology. So my question to you is, what will you do? And what will your community do? And more specifically, hopefully you've been introduced to a range of climate solutions with really diverse intervention points across individual, community, organizational, governmental, regional, national, and global scales. And it takes a whole ecosystem of activities and actors to create and accelerate the transformation that's required. So I'd like to invite you back to the chat box. And I'd like to ask you the same question that we started with. What comes to mind when you think about climate change and global warming?
We've got some answers in: composting, hope, education, opportunities, solar panels, like this impetus for a more just, clean, safe world. Engaging with solutions, community, empowerment. They keep rolling in.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, go ahead and keep filling up that chat box. I mean, Claire, how do you feel about that? I'm totally putting you on the spot, which is not very fair, but I think we see a little bit of a shift, don't we?
Oh yeah, it's night and day.
Oh my gosh, everybody. I am so excited. We know that there are incredible solutions in hand today for us to reach towards. So my question to you is, what do you want to reach towards? You know, the reality of intervening in a complex system is that no one can do it all. And we all have an opening to show up as problem solvers and change agents, and another word to use is solutionists, and contribute in significant ways, even when we feel small. Because we're living in a time of dramatic transformation. The basic physics, chemistry, and biology of this planet make that non-negotiable. Stasis is not an option. Society has a choice to make about what shape the transformation will take. Will we employ collective courage and determination and the diversity of existing solutions to really move the world towards a balance with the planet's living systems? Will we pursue climate action in ways that heal systemic injustices and foster resilience, well-being, and equality? Who will we choose to be? in this pivotal moment of human history. Together, we can leverage the solutions that are at hand today to build a bridge from where we are now to the world we want for ourselves, for all life, and most importantly, for generations yet to come. A better path is absolutely still possible, and may we turn that possibility into reality. Thanks so much, everybody.
Did you all just hear me? Can you
Yep.
hear
We
me
are
now? Okay. All right. So what I said was, thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was an inspiring and informative presentation. I'd now like to introduce Rob Schofield, who will first dialogue with Dr. Bagley on climate change and then moderate our audience question and answer session. When Rob starts the Q&A, he will be inviting two members of ICCT who have led exceptional Earth Ministry efforts in their faith communities, Lee Williams and Dawn Comfort, and I've asked each of them to briefly describe their Earth Ministry successes before they ask Elizabeth a question. So a little bit of background for Rob. Rob is the director of NC Policy Watch, which is a news and commentary outlet dedicated to informing the public and elected officials as they debate important issues. Rob has 3 decades of experience as a lawyer, lobbyist, writer, and commentator. And at NC Policy Watch, he writes online commentaries and handles public speaking and media appearances. And these include contributions to the NC Policy Watch blog, the Progressive Pulse, and the radio show News and Views. So Rob, you can take it from here.
Well, thanks very much, Gail. It's good to be with folks. It's good to be with, I see a lot of friendly, familiar faces, and it's a delight to be with you all again tonight. Thanks so much for being here. Obviously, hard to imagine a more important topic for us to be discussing. There's so many questions I'd like to ask Elizabeth. We've only got about 10 minutes, and then we'll go into a couple more that have been prearranged, and then we'll give you all a chance to ask some questions and whiz through this session for the next half hour or so. I guess, Elizabeth, I want to start with asking you a sort of a basic question about, talk a lot about climate change. A lot of folks have started, and I know at our website, we've begun to use the term climate emergency or climate crisis. And I wonder what your thought is on that. Is that helpful, productive to the debate and discussion that's going on, or is it somehow not so much?
That is, thank you for, thanks for thinking about wording, which is why I was hesitating, because thinking about framing and wording, as we all know, is so important. You know, one of the ways in which a lot of action has happened is through choosing the right language. And I have seen across the world that declaring climate emergencies, calling the situation we're in a climate crisis, is the kind of language and the kind of motivation that people need to really stop and think and act about it. So my advice around language is to know your audience and to know what they're going to react and respond to. We specifically at Project Drawdown, we made a really conscious effort not to use any kind of violent or militaristic language. So like fight climate change or combat, like we actually, it sounds kind of nerdy, but we kind of geek out about that kind of stuff. Like we want to come together, right? Like we don't want necessarily a villain. We want a better future, and we're all part of that. So I really love thinking about what are the words and the phrasing that'll bring us together and motivate us to put those solutions into action, again, to use our tagline, as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. And for some folks, it's absolutely using words like emergency and crisis So yeah, I think Rob, to throw it back at you, what was a little bit of the rationale around you all making that shift on your website?
Well, I think there was a general consensus from our environmental reporter and some of the other folks who we work with that the term climate change sounds kind of vanilla. It sounds like, well, that might not be so bad. Some people who aren't geeks like the rest of us aren't paying a lot of attention. It sounds gradual. It sounds, something that we'll worry about 100 years from now. And crisis and emergency perhaps brought a little more urgency to it. I don't know that it's the perfect solution, but that's sort of where we've come down.
Yeah, I think also one other thing on that, Rob, if COVID has taught us anything, which I think it's taught us many, many things, unfortunately, but one of the things, the flattening of the curve metaphor that we use a lot now, that we hear a lot, is the same thing we need to do with climate, right? Like I showed you that curve.
Yeah.
Drawdown, that moment of drawdown is flattening the curve for those heat trapping gases. So it's interesting how culture evolves and how language evolves. And I think flattening the curve is another great way to chat with people about climate and to have that conversation.
I wanted to ask you a question about COVID if we have time, but before I get to that, it seems sort of silly not to talk a little bit about politics, given the fact that we're in this extraordinary moment in our country right now where it looks as if we'll have a new administration, although how much power it will ultimately have to affect the kind of change that we all know is essential is up in the air. But talk to us about some of the hopes you may have for the Biden administration and steps it might take. We've heard talk, I was listening today to the news, talk about re-entering the Paris Agreement and rolling back some of the rollbacks in environmental protection that the Trump administration had unfortunately pursued. But clearly you've talked a lot about some really wonderful specific things that we can do in our communities, but it's obviously going to take large scale public action to really affect the kind of change we need. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. And I think, Robbie, you just hit on some things I'm really hopeful for. I'm really hopeful for, entering the Paris Climate Accords again. I'm really hopeful for using science kind of period, right? Like being driven, and you all already do that, especially through your organizations really being driven by science and having science be a key component of the federal administration, I think is a huge beacon for me, getting environmental protections back into place, because we know, as we chatted about earlier, that climate solutions have so many co-benefits, right? Yeah. So by rolling back environmental protections, we also rolled back human health protections on some of the most vulnerable people in our country. And we can't afford to do that. Nobody deserves that, right? So I'm really looking forward to those being put back into place to really help the most vulnerable in our communities. I'm also looking forward to, I saw a chat come through that people feel despondent, they're not motivated. Having leadership that, believes in science, that is working towards climate solutions, that is really inspiring. And I think that can inspire a lot of work across all agency levels. So yes, while it's really important for us to have federal leadership, it's also really important for us to have local and regional leadership, right? Like, what can you do in your communities? What can you do, in your states? And making sure that the places that we all call home are protected for generations to come. And that's not necessarily going to come from the federal level, but that's going to come from us. And knowing that we have the support and we have the leadership at the federal level, I think can be really inspiring, really motivating for us. So I think that's just kind of a big shift in cultural shift that we need to have happen.
Another question that occurs is, well, it's partially illustrated by the fact that we just had 70 million people vote for Donald Trump, but that the language that you use, the language that most of us, I don't know, for lack of a better term, wholesome liberal church-going types, congregation members around the United States, a very, for the most part, very white and affluent group, the kind of language we use may not resonate with people, a lot of other people in our country, with people of differing racial and ethnic backgrounds, people who are frankly not doing as well and may be living more hand to mouth day to day, and it just seems like, well, I don't have time to worry about that. I wonder if there's even an element of, there's a very altruistic element to the agenda you outline. I wonder if there's a way if there's a greed element, if there's a positive element that comes into this where some people can look at it and say, look, I can get rich, I can make money the old-fashioned American way. I wonder if any of those elements can be a part of the solution. I know that sort of maybe rubs some of us the wrong way, but one senses that it's going to take more than just convincing our fellow progressives to make this happen. I don't know if that makes sense where I'm going with that. But.
Yeah, I love that, Rob. And I think that there's a couple directions that a couple different paths I could go down. One is really remembering that our shared values, right? Because there are probably people in your faith communities who think differently from you when it comes to climate. Yet you do have those core shared values, right? You show up, you're part of those communities. And if we can start there, if we can start at the shared values, we can have conversations. And I'm not going to try to be Catherine Hayhoe because she's just fabulous. So she has a whole series on PBS, for those of you who are not familiar with her, called Global Weirding. And she talks about how to talk with people about climate change, but first grounded in values. So I think that's a really fabulous approach to, grounded in our shared values that we have as humans. I also think that, oh gosh, I was going to say something else, Rob, about
That's right.
one of the things you said. I know. A leading resource in the space is actually a group called the Climate Advocacy Lab. And the Climate Advocacy Lab does loads of fabulous research on how we think and process concepts like climate and figuring out how to best communicate with all sorts of different people. So I would, for those of you, as you, let's say that you want to do a campaign in your faith community or something, and you want to know how should I word this? For example, here's a really specific example. When Google wanted to reduce the amount of meat that they were feeding their Googlers, their employees, right? And they first started calling it Meatless Mondays, right? And we've heard that probably before. Lots of places have Meatless Mondays. And Googlers revolted because it felt like something was being taken away from them, because it was, let's be honest, it was being taken away, and it was called Meatless, and they felt like that was being taken away. When they instead changed the language to Plant Forward Mondays, people loved it because they're like, you know what? I've always wondered what to do with eggplants. Now I can try it. Or I never want to cook with okra because I don't know how to do it. And let me try this. So it was really just a simple shifting of the language from meatless to plant forward so that people felt abundance rather than scarcity. And I think that's really the conversation we want to have. So when you talked about, can we be more capitalist or can we get more money or something about it, we do want to figure out how to have those conversations about abundance, right? That putting these climate solutions into place will make life better for everyone long term, right? And while there might be some short-term sacrifices, the abundance is clear and we are ready for it.
It seems to me that that's critically important. I know that, frankly, when I first heard the term drawdown, it sort of sounded like wind down. It sort of sounded like, and I know there are those who think that we need to dramatically alter how we live on the planet. We need to give up travel. We need to, live in a much more basic, primitive way. Maybe that's true, but that's a really hard sell to people in the world today, to get them to get their arms, or to affirmatively embrace the idea that they're going to make enormous personal sacrifices, or at least what they would perceive to be personal sacrifices in their lifestyle. And so maybe those terms, abundance, not shying away from embracing that is a positive, hopeful thing. I think we've whizzed through the 10 minutes I was allotted. So in order to keep us on schedule, I want to turn now to Lee Williams, who's with the NC Eastern Conference of the United Methodist Church, their Season of Creation program, with a question and an endorsement. Lee?
Yeah, thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was amazing. I was inspired again. I've seen Drawdown presentations before, and I kind of thought I'd seen all that Drawdown had to offer, but you've given me a lot of new hope tonight. So my local church took on diverting food waste from our landfill by utilizing a local composting program. And we've been intentional on connecting the dots for the congregation to help them start thinking about the soil and God's design, where nothing in nature is wasted. It gets them thinking about food, agriculture, and land use, just like you said, in a way they may not have done before. Of course, we are neither eating or gathering at our church right now, but our team has some ideas for allowing community members to come and use the bins until we can meet again. And now that you've talked about that idea, I'm invigorated to move forward with that. On a conference level, he mentioned that I work on my North Carolina conference. It's about 600 United Methodist Church in Eastern North Carolina. We started maybe 3 years ago as a grassroots committee with the blessing of our bishop. This summer, we were voted in as an official committee of the North Carolina United Methodist Conference, which was really exciting and big for us. So to celebrate this official status in September, we did put together a 7-part series on all types of creation care issues webinars. So we did all different topics, including one on Drawdown, which was exciting. Nearly all of them did make a mention of Drawdown, actually. My expertise and interest is in zero waste, and there are many overlapping solutions with zero waste. And the webinars, for anybody who wants to do this at their churches or conferences, were kicked off by a conference-wide creation care sermon from our bishop. So that was a really beautiful way for her to affirm our work. They're all available on our conference page for reference and for people to watch into the future for all time. So we are continuing to work on ideas to connect our congregations to issues of creation and to help our pastors integrate the teachings into their sermons and into the life of the church. That leads me to my question. Last summer, I attended the National United Methodist Church Creation Care Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was there that I got to meet keynote speaker and likely your friend, Catherine Wilkinson. She is one of the Drawdown authors, and I was just starstruck. I'm not usually that excited about famous people, but I was really excited to get my picture with her. I excitedly told her how proud I was of my town's environmental advisory board, who had spent months reading Drawdown together and then formulated a set of carbon recommendations for our town. Those recommendations were later presented to town council and accepted to be reviewed by staff. But I'm afraid they haven't made a whole lot of progress since then. And so my question then is, knowing that time is of the essence, how can community members engage with local government to help them consider integrating the Drawdown principles into city planning, as there are so many important ways they can engage?
Well, so my next event this evening is actually testifying in front of the Sitka, well, virtually with the Sitka Assembly. So I'll let you know. How about if I let you know how that goes?
That's awesome. And I've actually been to Sitka, so that's really exciting for me.
I love it. Yeah, there's snow on the mountains. It's lovely. It's not raining today, which is lovely. You know, Lee, the community processes take time, and we know that, right? We know, I think it would be unwise of us to try to push things through too quickly without the kinds of community support we need for the long haul. One of the things I like to think about with the climate crisis is this is not a sprint, folks, right? This is a marathon, right? And we need to make sure that everybody's suited up and ready to go and has enough food and water to make it the 26.2 miles. I can probably drop the metaphor here, but you get it. Like, we're not just trying to get quick wins. I mean, we can get some quick wins, but we really need, you know, continued long-term commitment. So what I'm talking about tonight with the commission, with the assembly rather, is, you know, they just wanted a climate task force that would just deliver a quick plan and then be done with, which basically was a couple of assembly members saying, let's check the box on climate and be done with it. And we saw through that. We were like, you know what, actually, we need a commission on sustainability. And we need those folks to be in it for the long haul. We need them to be looking for state and federal funding. We need them to be deep in it. And so that's, you know, that's one of the recommendations I would make, to really make sure that you've got some folks and the support for long-term sustained commitment, so that these actions can be put into place, so that these coalitions can be built, so that we don't just have, one quick win and then we lose all of our steam and we don't do anything else. So my sense is that building up some of that capacity early on pays huge dividends down the road. So I wouldn't be discouraged. I would maybe, pick it back up, figure out who you can get to work with you on it or revise it, and find those champions to move it forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I adore Catherine so much. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but she's moving on from Drawdown because, and it's not really bad news. I mean, selfishly it is, but she's got, and I put these in the chat box. She came out, it's not here right now, but with a new book called All We Can Save, which for those of you who want a book club, I love that people are nodding. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's an anthology written by all female folks in climate.
It's poetic.
And
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful.
Mhm.
And there's a whole book club if you want to do a book club on it. And she and Leah Stokes, who I mentioned from UC Santa Barbara, have a new podcast. Oh, Lynn Lyle with the book. Look at that book placement. Thank you, Lynn. That's perfect. So All We Can Save, I put it in there. And then I also mentioned A Matter of Degrees podcast, where they just cut through all of the baloney and really help us understand what we can do and what we should be doing. I'm obsessed with their podcast. So highly recommend those two things
Awesome.
So thanks, Lee.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Our next question comes from Dawn Comfort, who's with West Raleigh Presbyterian Church.
Hey, yes, hello. Thanks so much for this. I really enjoyed it. I took a whole page of notes, so lots to take back with me. As you mentioned, I am with West Raleigh Presbyterian. I'm the chair of their Earth Care team there. We have been an Earth Care congregation since 2014. And for those who are not intimately familiar with PCUSA, this is a program across the denomination that focuses on environmental action in 4 areas, and that's worship and education, facilities, and outreach. So as you would think, we sort of started, with some internal audits and soul searching as to what we could do, and facilities is sort of the natural area that people, it's very quantifiable, grab a hold of that, tackle that. So we did things like raise money to put 50 solar panels on the top of our building, and make sure that we're using all reusables when we have gatherings. We also had this, we are a church that's sort of right by the NC State campus, so we are very landlocked and parking can be a challenge, as it is in campus communities. We had a vacant lot across from our church for years and years that had been earmarked early on when it was given to us some 50 years ago as, hey, we could expand our parking lot into this vacant lot. Well, luckily that did not pass code at all, and so one member really pushed forward, and now we have a community pollinator garden there as opposed to a new parking lot. And we're working to get beehives in there, and it's just been a huge blessing during this time of COVID when we have realized we can't gather inside, but hey, some of these community gathering spaces outside are exactly what we need, where we can gather the youth in small groups and other small sessions. So the outdoor space has been just a true blessing during these times. And then we started to try to evolve a little bit and focus on more the education and outreach. So Gail graciously came in and did a series on Drawdown for us. That was just a lot of food for thought for all of us, and as we continue on our journey. And then, trying for outreach, like trying to partner with some of these organizations like ICCT, as opposed to just, what can we do internally? So that sort of gets me into my question, which a lot of what we have done has been trying to inspire and educate our members as to how they could adapt. But thinking about it, we're a community organization, and as a faith community, we have a certain moral authority perhaps in the community. And how would you suggest we could use our voice as an organization in the public square to affect change on sort of a bigger community scale?
I love how you're thinking, Dawn. Thanks for sharing your incredible work. And I love how you're thinking about, how can you have the most impact on the community? And I think there's, your community much better than I do. And so I guess my charge to you would be to figure out what kind of likely or possibly even unlikely alliances might you be able to build, right? So, I can give examples in Sitka. So with the commission that we're proposing, we want to make sure that leaders from all of the faith communities here are given a voice and given an opportunity to be part of the crafting of the goals of the commission, because we know that those faith leaders carry enormous weight with their communities, right? And they're trusted messengers. And so that when we think about communicating with the general public about climate, trusted messengers are worth their weight in gold. Like, they're incredible, right? We want to listen to people we trust. We want to follow them. And so finding ways for faith communities to integrate with, and actually a great example is what Gail brought up earlier about what's happening in Raleigh with the 135-acre development. How might faith communities align with some of the other organizations who are raising important questions about that development, so that they can bring citizens together to ask questions of the planning department or of the mayor and other people to make sure that climate solutions and racial justice are really at the center of it. So I guess my bit of a monologue ramble would be, I would think about how, where might you build coalitions? Like, who might you be able to work with that maybe is unlikely? So another example is at Project Drawdown, we're working closely with the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. So with the Rotary clubs all over the world. So we know that Rotarians are people of action and they want to act on the environment. So they've come to us to say, hey, how can we work on environmental projects in our communities? And a lot of the Rotarian projects are also projects with faith communities and with other community organizations. So don't try to do it alone. See where you can build a larger coalition and have impacts also on, to Rob's earlier point, with communities of color, right? Like, how can we make sure that we're reaching out to communities that have been disenfranchised before, who haven't been part of the conversation? Like, let's make sure that we're bringing everybody to the table. And I think that's one of the ways that faith communities, that's one way that you can bring people in, through connections with other faith communities and other organizations within your communities. Did that help, Dawn? That was like a long ramble.
It did. Like I said, I have a whole page of notes, and I've been adding to it as you speak.
Great.
That's great. Thanks, Dawn. Well, we've got a few minutes left. We're going to pose a few of the questions that have appeared over the chat and maybe synthesize a few of them before we wrap up tonight. Obviously, thanks again, Dr. Bagley, for a wonderful presentation. A lot of people are expressing, I don't know, I think it's fair to say, frustration, some disheartened feelings in the chat, as I think most of us have friends and family members who sometimes express those. They confront so many skeptics. They watch the media and watch politicians call the people who talk about the climate crisis as being extremists. They hear the talk about, the climate has changed, it's going to change again, it changes over time. This is beyond humans. I know there's a scientific response to that, obviously, because that's not completely true, but any thoughts about any breakthroughs that folks have had in terms of getting through some of these walls that have been erected by the skeptics and the naysayers?
Absolutely. The first thing, I just popped it in the chat instead of sharing my screen. So for those of you who want to pop it up, I love the team at Yale's program on climate change communication. They're just fabulous. And so what you'll see on that site is, First of all, you'll see 6 kind of funny comics, but if you scroll a little past that, there's a spectrum. And what Yale has done for the past decade or more is they've surveyed the national population to figure out where we fall in terms of our belief in global warming, right? And so the spectrum is from highest belief in global warming, most concerned, most motivated to do something, to least concerned and least motivated, right? And the amazing thing about this, if you want to dive into the nerdy research and look at over time, if you scroll further down that page, you can see how the 6 Americas have changed over time. And the dismissive, so the folks at the far end where they're like, there is no such thing as global warming, this is a bunch of hooey, I don't believe it, they are now, so let's see, in 2015, 12% of the American population would have been characterized as dismissive. Today in 2020, 7%. That's incredible, right? That's a pretty significant change. So, but you know, at Project Drawdown, this might sound kind of bad. We don't actually really even try to engage with the dismissive folks because 93% of the rest of the population is either alarmed, concerned, cautious, or just a bit disengaged and doubtful. Those are the people who we want to have conversations with, right? And those are the people where we really want to support them, especially the people we can see that the doubtful category is getting smaller, disengaged is getting smaller over time, and the alarmed category is really increasing. So let's really help give people the tools they need to put solutions into place. So I have plenty of relatives back in Wisconsin and Minnesota and Texas and even here in Alaska who are doubtful, disengaged, or dismissive. And I try to shift our conversations to that place of shared values. I saw someone in the chat, really thinking about our language, like talking about clean air, clean water, how especially up here in Alaska and in rural Wisconsin where I'm from, we want to be able to hunt and we want to be able to fish, right? And we want to be able to provide for our families. Using those values and that language, that can get an awful lot done. So I don't bemoan the fact that maybe I won't use the phrase climate crisis with everybody, but I'm still going to get to the same end goal. And that to me is really what it's all about.
One of the commenters, I think, offers the insightful observation that part of the reason many people are skeptical or dismissive is because they too are fearful and they too are overwhelmed by the reality of it. And so it's easier just to engage in denial. And maybe by presenting these kinds of realistic solutions of things that can be done about it, maybe we break through some of those walls. Another person's asked a question about divestment, about their church's investments and where they put their money and whether they should be investing in fossil fuel companies. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that and whether that's something that there's some track record for moving out of that, perhaps, for some congregations.
Sure. Yeah, I do. We at Project Drawdown, I was, really blessed to walk into an organization where we already, as you might not be surprised, are divested. Our 401k is through an organization called Vest Well. That's who. Not that I'm,
right,
shilling for them at all, but I was really really surprised, and not surprised, I was really grateful. And I remember 10 years ago when I had a little bit of an AmeriCorps stipend that maybe it was more than 10 years now. It was, oh gosh, well, I'm dating myself. Anyway, a while ago, like 15 years ago, I had a little AmeriCorps stipend I wanted to invest in. And I called a bunch of places and asked about, can you guarantee that none of this is going to, I want to make sure that my investments are aligned with my ethics, right, and my values. And nobody could do anything 15 years ago. Today, it's really different. So today, I would highly recommend, running the numbers. I know that our faith communities want to be able and need to be able to use that money to support the faith community, and you don't necessarily have to lose money by investing in sustainable ways. So there are so many more firms now who know how to do this and do this really well, I think it's a great exercise, if nothing else, just to see what else is out there. Oftentimes we put our money in an investment place and just kind of leave it. I think now is, as good a time as any to really take a step back and realize, are we investing in ways that are aligned with our values? And like I said, there's lots of people who can help us on that path.
We're coming to the end of our time. I know the 8 o'clock hour approaches here on the East Coast, and you probably have lots of things still to do this evening in the Great White North. But I did want to give you maybe,
if that makes you feel any better about your life in North Carolina.
well, that's going to be that way for the next 6 months, right? A final question, I guess, would be, before we turn it back over to Gail to wrap us up, is, are there any sort of surprises you've experienced in recent months and years in this kind of work, things that you would, or people perhaps that you wouldn't have suspected, that maybe you've seen them see the light and seen a turnaround, or just some sort of unexpected positive development that gives you hope and maybe is a happy note to end us on tonight, to leave folks with?
Rob, that's so fun, because I am really, really inspired by the youth movement across the world, right? I think the youth, they didn't ask for this challenging position that we're in. And so they are really stepping up and stepping forward and taking this opportunity to say, let's do stuff, everybody. Come on, this is the world that we're inheriting. And so one of the things I like to think about is, how can all of us be the best ancestors to our descendants, right? Like, that's something I think we can hold on to. Like, let's be incredible ancestors for our descendants, and let's work together with those youth. Maybe you all have youth groups as part of your, faith communities. How might you come together? For example, tonight with the assembly work that I'm doing, we're bringing in some local youth, and they are just incredible. And I'm so inspired by their passion, by their commitment. I mean, they're going to show up on a school night to, testify in front of the assembly. It's kind of boring, but they're going to do it because they know that that's how work gets done. So I would say the youth, to me, are just are really inspiring, and I'm so grateful that they're stepping up.
That's great. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this conversation. And Gail, take us home.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth and Rob, for an incredible presentation and enlightening conversation this evening. And thank you to all of our wonderful ICCT staff for your support tonight, as well as Lee Williams and Dawn Comfort. I just have a few closing words here. Let's remember that climate change is a real and urgent threat to humanity and all life on Earth. One of my favorite quotes, which hung on the wall of my 8th grade science classroom for many years, is this: we did not inherit the Earth from our ancestors, we borrowed it from our children. That fits with what Elizabeth just said. We must make it a priority to work together to preserve our planet for future generations. If you would like to learn more about how to become part of the Drawdown solution and our ICCT faith-based Drawdown webinar series, contact us at our website via the contact tab, or email us at icctriangle@gmail.com. And I'd like to close with a reflection, a prayer. Barbara Molinari Quinby shared a prayer with me recently, and I modified it to fit tonight's program. So I'd like to say thank you to Barbara for that. Loving Creator, create in us an awareness of the massive forces that threaten our planet. Inspire us to spread the hopeful message of Project Drawdown and engage our faith communities in climate action. In this time of new leadership, help us to advocate for policies that address climate change and promote environmental justice. Give us a sense of urgency to activate the forces within our own being, forces of goodness, of justice, and of love. Provide us with the stamina we need to sustain our efforts to preserve the health of our planet and its many diverse inhabitants. Amen. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you all for caring about Earth Ministry efforts and contributing to the health of our planet. We appreciate it. Have a good evening.